Tiny and we got tickets to a Halloween party. We actually got fairly cheap tickets for a Halloween party because I've always wanted to do one of those um, like community Halloween parties where it's at a ballroom with an open bar kind of a thing. Like this. Did you ever see the movie Hocus Pocus?
Yes.
Yeah. You know the scene where the whole town goes to the stupid Halloween party,
Mm-hmm.
and then Bette Midler and their sisters come in and put a spell on them.
Right.
I've always wanted to go to one of those. I mean, it seems like such a silly little thing.
You're going to a Halloween party with the entire city of Chicago there?
Yeah, it's a nice little small town community Halloween party in the fourth most populous city in the United States.
Excellent. That should be crowded.
Yeah, first most populous if you go by rats, but I think we did get that award again this year.
Oh, nice.
The award for the most rats.
It's good to be proud of your town.
Yeah, well, no, I mean we have a couple of really big achievements. We've got a lot of art installations. I think we're first or second for public art installations. We are first for number of rats per capita. And we are right now leading the major metropolitan areas in homicides and gun shooting, gun deaths. So, we're doing good.
Good. Welcome to Chicago.
Anyway, we got tickets to a Halloween party that is it's at Navy Pier, which is sticks out into Lake Michigan. It's like a touristy spot, but they got a bar and a ballroom and stuff. And I already had a costume because of Gen Con last year.
Mm-hmm.
And Tiny has decided that she is going to go as the builder from Dragon Quest Builders because she's been playing that. And it's this adorable little costume. I love, in all the Dragon Quest games, or Dragon Warrior, depending on how old you are and what country you played them in, all the character designs going back from the very beginning were done by Akira Toriyama, who also did he did the Dragon Ball Z manga and the anime series. So his character designs are very, very distinctive, especially when the characters get even remotely upset or anxious, and then they start to glow, and then their hair sticks up spiky.
Right.
But the character designs in it are adorable. So she's going as the female version of the main character because you can choose male or female. And we just got a bunch of stuff from Amazon today, which included most of the components of her costume. And also, I bought myself my first Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi is it's a small, self-contained microcomputer. It's on a single board. It's about the size of an index card, with a bunch of different ports on it. And it accepts an SD card, and it's got a couple of chips, and you can program it. So people will use them for all sorts of different things, like if you're building your own drones, you can use it as the controller for that. But what I am doing with it is I am building my own retro video game console to contain all of my favorite retro video games. I shall not name any particular brands or consoles because, of course, that would be of dubious legality.
Mm-hmm.
But I am looking at games, on systems that rhyme with Schmintendo.
Oh, Schmintendo. Yes, I remember
Schmintendo, the classic, and also the Super Schmintendo. But it actually turned up because there was an article online that a friend of mine tweeted because she was offended by it. She got very upset by this article. I'm sure you know about the whole NES Classic and the SNES Classic that Nintendo have been put out, which is a small, self-contained little retro game console preloaded with 30 games, and you can't add any more games to it or anything like that.
The ones they've been rationing out drip by drip.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Their policies for it are so anti-consumer that I no longer feel guilty about, basically engaging in what has, it's piracy. Okay? Like, I would pay them money to play all of these games again.
Sure.
Okay? And all of the ways that they have given thus far are so anemic and piss poor. It's like they have the virtual console where you could download some old games on your Wii or your Nintendo DS or your Switch or whatever the kids have now. And the number of offerings are so anemic, and they use their own point system, so you have to spend your money to buy the points, and so it never, you end up spending more money than you need to buy the stuff. And the pricing is a little bit absurd for these old games. And then they come out with these little retro consoles, and you think, wow, that's exactly what I wanted. I would love to have just a classic Nintendo that I could just hook up to my TV and play all these games. And it's like, well, yeah, we put 30 games in there, and that's all, and you can never put any more in. And also, we only made 6 of them, so good luck getting one.
Yeah. I hear that's been the big challenge. It's not whether or not the games are any good. It's actually getting hold of one to find out.
Well, it's a list of what they decide are their 20 to 30 classic games. But what drives me crazy is that they so easily could do it better. Because all these games are at this point is it's just a ROM image, basically an image of the program, the code on the chip.
Mm-hmm.
Because and they have it all. So once you program the hardware or the software to emulate, pretend to be a Nintendo or to pretend to be a Super Nintendo, it would be very easy for them to make these available. And yet they don't. Like if I went to the store and bought a SNES Classic and could actually find one, and I could bring it home and hook it up, and it came preloaded with 20 games, and it also connected to the internet, and for like $1 a pop or $2 a pop, I could buy any other games from a library of 200 or 300 games, I would probably end up spending hundreds of dollars. So at this point, I have to conclude Nintendo does not actually want my money. And so I will keep my money. And so I have bought this little microcontroller unit. And I am going to, basically drop program it with an emulator or emulators and put in games that I want, and it will have a huge library, and then it's got an HDMI port, so it connects right to my TV, and I've got some classic controllers that connect to it through USB, and it's going to be awesome. And Nintendo could have had all of this money and more, but they didn't want it. And the whole article was basically just the headline. The headline of the article was, why spend, $80 or whatever it is on an SNES Classic when you can just build one yourself for $40. And a friend of mine saw the article and she retweeted it because she was really mad that the headline was making her feel bad for her purchase. It's like, how dare this person, make fun of people who just want to buy this thing and don't want to build it and whatever. And why use that? Why not just say, why make me feel bad for my fun? And I'm like, thanks for retweeting that, because now I know how to do it. I can do this myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, seriously, I think ultimately I bought a little plastic case that they put out that's shaped like a Nintendo. Which was the fun part, and that was $20. But the rest of it, the Raspberry Pi, a power supply for it, and the little micro SD card that you actually put the programming on, it's like $50, I think. So
do you have to actually do the programming yourself, or is there like an image you can download and it's all done?
There are images you can download. You can tweak some stuff yourself if you want to, depending on how you're doing it. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. There's one very easy entry point. There is a program called RetroPie, which was specifically for doing exactly this. It's a video game emulator that just goes into a Raspberry Pi, and you can just download that, drop it in, and then adjust the settings. And then if you configure it to talk to your wireless network, you can just drop game images on it in and out whenever you want.
That sounds interesting. You have to let me know how that comes out.
Yeah. And, the RetroPie thing is nice because it'll do Schmintendo, Super Schmintendo. It'll do all the Game Boys. It'll do the Schmega Genesis. And it'll even do all the arcade stuff.
I was reading an article earlier today over on Polygon
Mm-hmm.
somebody was reviewing the Sega Genesis flashback
Mm-hmm.
from AT Games,
Right.
which is, as near as I can figure, about a 70% scale of the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, it's a little miniature Sega Genesis. Does it use? No, it comes preloaded,
Yes,
right?
it comes preloaded.
Yes, it's basically the same thing.
Right. Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Except it's the same thing, not done nearly as well, according to the article.
How could you do? Like as I've already said, you can't do much worse than Nintendo did.
Apparently, rather than having a menu that works, they've elected to do one that is far too complicated to use.
That's a good choice.
Yes. Apparently, the games don't run very well because reasons.
How could they, like at this point, all they would have to do, and I hate to say this, they can go online and get an emulator that would run their games perfectly well and just download
Well,
it.
the suggestion seems to be that that's exactly what they've done, except they've put it on hardware that can just barely run the emulator.
Well, I guess they're trying to bring it in cheap.
Right.
Though, again, I'm a little bit confused by this because I bought an entire self-contained microcomputer on an index card for $40.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
what the hell are they doing?
It does come with 85
Well-
built-in games.
Okay, you know what? Right there, they win over Nintendo.
Well, now maybe. Because that is apparently not 85 built-in Sega Genesis games.
Okay, that's an interesting choice.
You have basically 28 shovelware sort of games,
Okay.
including such genius things as chess and checkers and
Oh,
Curling
man, those
2010.
Genesis classics.
Mr. Balls.
You know, actually, I'm glad that they, even though they had a good reason to go back and do like Curling 95. I'm glad that they took the time to just update it and do the Curling 2010.
Yes.
because the sport has changed a lot.
Excellent. They also have 7 classic Sega Master System games.
Okay.
3 of them are various versions of Alex Kidd.
Well, that's fair enough, though. I mean,
2 are Fantasy Zone.
Alex Kidd was basically their mascot before Sonic came along, and Theodore Roosevelt.
They have Dragon Crystal and the original Phantasy Star.
Okay.
And because they can, they've included some Game Gear games.
Okay.
Baku Baku, Sonic Chaos, Sonic Drift 2, Sonic Triple Trouble, and Tails Adventure.
Well, thank God they got Tails Adventure in there.
The rest of the games are all Sega Genesis games.
And there's 45 of them.
And there are
right,
45
if
of
I'm
them.
counting right? Okay.
They are very much the exact same ones as what I was talking about way back, what was it, episode 2 or 3?
Yeah.
That I got off of Steam for like $20.
Yeah. Okay.
They're all first party games. They're all Sega games, but no third party stuff. So
Oh, okay. But does it have Sword of Vermilion?
no, I don't think so. Did I see Sword of Vermilion in here? Yes, I did. Never mind, it does.
Oh. Okay. Well.
So anyway, that's what's going on. The other apparently cardinal sin, according to this article, is that I don't know if you've ever really looked at a Sega Genesis. I mean, there's one in the accompanying picture in the article.
Well, we had one in the household. It was my sister's.
Okay, well, you know where the Sega Genesis logo is.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's been shoved up above the cart slot in a smaller size so that they can make room for the AT Games logo in the regular spot.
Wait, now, I'm sorry. In this review
Yes.
by Polygon that you're referring to here,
Yes.
is that a positive or a negative?
That appears to be a negative.
Well, at least Polygon is really slamming it for the important details.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, they've got some good points apparently. The controllers are longer than the Nintendo ones, I guess, because they're wireless is why.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it. Then they're infinity long, or at least to the limit of where your signal will reach.
Right.
But here's the thing. Can you get one?
Probably.
Because if you can actually go to a store and buy one of these, then I still gotta say Genesis is doing what Nintendo don't.
We got some feedback to feedback.
Oh shoot! They actually found our
They
email
did.
address?
In fact, I got an email about 2 days after episode 1 launched, which simply said, "Yes, you should have an email." And that was it.
Was the email sent to our official email?
No.
Oh, okay.
It was sent to me directly. And that caused a certain amount of confusion on my part, because I didn't immediately connect up A to B. I thought maybe I was supposed to have had a different other email that was actually important.
Oh.
But it turns out I did not. That was the entire message. So when I inquired, it was explained to me that I was dumb. So that's fine. But as for other things I've been doing, I did start playing, for reasons which I have not successfully explained to myself yet again. I did start playing the Divinity series.
Okay. Well, they just came out with... Did they not? No,
Yeah.
I'm thinking something
Yes,
else.
they did. Divinity 2...
Or Divinity Original Sin.
Yeah,
2.
Original Sin. There you go. Yeah, Divinity Original Sin 2. Which did cause some confusion name-wise and in trying to sort out what order these things were released in.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a sequel to Divinity 2, it's a sequel to Divinity Original Sin.
Right.
Which was earlier in the game series than Divinity 2 is, but it's not among the first. Boy, that's great.
Yeah, that's... I hate when they do that garbage with the...
This is what I've worked out. All right, this is the order I believe things are supposed to go in.
Okay.
You have Divine Divinity was the first one.
Right.
It was very much it's very much in the original Fallout Diablo model.
Right. CRPG.
Yeah.
Semi turn-based, right?
It's not
turn-based,
entirely.
but with pausing.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you go to Beyond Divinity.
Okay.
That's number 2 in the series. Then you go to Divinity 2. Now, there are 2 titles in that Divinity 2. But fortunately, modern day gaming means you don't actually have to do it that way. You can get Divinity 2 Developer's Cut.
Oh, okay.
Which includes both of the titles that are under Divinity 2.
There is not going to be a test on this.
There might be.
Podcast, is there? Oh, damn it.
There might very well be.
Can you start again then?
No.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, so the point is there are two titles. Divinity 2 had 2 subtitle games under that heading, right? And both of those are in the Divinity 2 Developer's Cut. So,
Okay.
So the first 2, the first Divine Divinity and Beyond Divinity are those, 3/4 overhead grid kind of walkie pokey click here to go there kind of things, right? Divinity 2 is a over the shoulder or behind the character third person, forward facing 3D graphical walk around open area game kind of thing.
Okay.
Also an RPG.
Right.
Right. And then you go to Divinity Original Sin, then you've got your Divinity Candy and Cake, and then you've got Divinity Original Sin 2. And
Wait, Candy and Cake, is that actually
that's
a thing,
that's
or are you
entirely
being
yes.
funny?
That is me filling a gap that I
Okay.
couldn't remember.
That's fine. I can't even tell right now. If you could see my face right now,
I know your eyes have glazed over. I can tell.
I really have. I'm just
Because it took me about an hour to figure out what order all of these things were supposed to be in.
Right.
So I'm right there with you. This was like, I almost just decided, no, I don't really. No, it's too complicated.
Well, can I mean, are you going to, no, okay, I'll let you finish, giving us the whole.
No, I'm essentially done. That's it.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you a question now with this whole thing. Are the games interconnected to the point where playing them in order or not having played one or jumping in changes anything in the experience?
I don't know.
Okay. But you've been playing them.
Yeah, well, theoretically I have been playing them.
You're just not sure.
I will continue with my story at this point. Divine Divinity, remember the Fallout-y, Diablo-y kind of thing?
Right.
Runs like crap.
Okay.
I mean, it is herky-jerky, terrible, bad frame rates all the way around. And I don't have a small system. I have some pretty good beef here on this end of things.
Okay.
So I've really not played that more than about 30 minutes because that was all I could stand. Beyond Divinity runs much better. But I've only played about 5 minutes of that because I stepped out of the jail cell they start you in.
Okay.
And was immediately killed.
That'll happen. Well, you're not supposed to step out of the
Yes,
jail cell.
I know.
You're in the jail cell for a reason.
But it was so abrupt and so out of left field that I just went, wait a minute, I might come back to that. So I ended up at Divinity 2 Developer's Cut, which I'm enjoying much more, and I've actually made some little bit of progress in. Although I have to say, it's pretty brutal as well if you're not ready for what it's going to do to you.
Okay.
It starts out very nice and soft and light, and like a lot of other RPG video games of its ilk.
Sure.
And then there's a point where you go to have your actual real first fight, and you just get wiped out. So clearly you have learned nothing at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, well, we taught you everything, and now clearly you weren't paying attention.
But I am enjoying it more. But I will go back and visit probably Beyond Divinity, but I don't think I'm going to get Divine Divinity up and running.
Okay, now I feel bad asking this because I don't want to imply that I wasn't paying attention.
Right.
The one you've been playing currently, have you gone anywhere near Divinity Original Sin 2?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
Because I was actually, sadly enough, the only reason that I was holding out in this conversation and didn't go to reading a book was because I've been hearing various things about Divinity Original Sin 2. I have no experience with the Divinity series, and I was wondering if I should get it.
Yeah.
I was really hoping that somewhere in your story that would come out.
No, this is all the further I've gotten so far is Divinity 2.
Okay.
All right. Now I'm looking at the list, and there's still Divinity Dragon Commander. There's still Divinity Original Sin Enhanced Edition, all before I get to Divinity Original Sin 2.
All right. Wow. All right, but seriously, if you don't stop going through the list of these games, I'm going to go through the list of the proper chronological order of the Legend of Zelda games.
We got some feedback on episode 1, and so far we've had a little. It just came out 2 days ago. We had a little bit of feedback on episode 2.
Okay.
I expect that will increase as we go along, and we'll just incorporate that when we get it.
Yeah.
All right. But
fair enough.
Lost in Hyrule. This is the person's name.
Okay. Speaking of Legend of Zelda,
Mr. Hyrule wrote in to say, could be Mrs. Hyrule or Miss Hyrule or anyway.
Don't even.
Lost in Hyrule wrote in and and among the many nice, he was our first bit of feedback.
Or she.
They
were our first.
They were our first bit of feedback. And among the many nice things they had to say,
mm-hmm.
they had a query which I think you and I might be able to answer.
Okay.
Lost in Hyrule said, I don't really know what or how I'd go about learning the old adventures, or if it's a worthwhile endeavor. This was in relation to the D&D nostalgia thing we were talking about.
where we specifically had mentioned how people playing D&D now, when they're playing with old bees, they hear about, or grognards, I guess I should say, they hear about all these old adventures and the reminiscing, and it makes them curious, and that might be one of the reasons why Wizards of the Coast is justified in re-releasing the old stuff.
Exactly. So I don't really know what or how I'd go about learning the old adventures, or if it's a worthwhile endeavor. What do you think? It's a worthwhile endeavor to go back and actually work out how to play the old, Tomb of Horrors and the old White Plume Mountain and the old, all that stuff?
It really, I mean, I'm going to take the cop out answer and say it kind of depends on why you're playing in the first place. If you're playing with your friends and having a good time and you enjoy D&D, there's really no reason to go back and see where it came from. If you are curious about where D&D came from, about where the roots were, and what used to pass for adventures, then by all means, it is worthwhile. But this is the thing, okay? The stuff doesn't hold up, in my opinion. Okay, it doesn't, right? I mean, there are some adventures that marked important turning points in the way D&D adventures were written. The whole, what was it, Against the Giants series, for instance, that was actually the first series with, no, Drow, that was the one that led to the Drow, right? Against the Giants.
Yes.
No. Yeah, Against the
Yeah.
Giants leads to the Drow, leads down to Menzoberranzan and all that
Mhm.
stuff. So that was actually the first series of published adventures ever. And that was being written at a time when Gygax was also revising D&D. So it's interesting to see, I should say the first published adventures by TSR and Gygax. So it's interesting to see what they were doing there. Ravenloft was a major change in the way adventures were being written because they wanted to they wanted to actually focus on story, because previous adventures had been mostly about pure dungeon crawls. And one of the other interesting things you find in Ravenloft is signs that replayability was an issue because people would play the same adventures over and over and over again. And Ravenloft actually has some built-in mechanics based around a card deck that would randomize basically the plot of the adventure and the MacGuffin and where it was located and where Strahd's lair was in the castle, so that every time you played it, it was a slightly different experience, which at the time was important. Nowadays, though, that sort of thing, that replayability is not an issue at all. But so if you have a curiosity about that stuff, then absolutely you can find these adventures online. Obviously, the best place to find them legally is D&D Classics. The D&D Adventurers Guild, is that what they call their online store now?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Yeah, the D&D Adventurers Guild, one of the collections or one of their groupings is what they call D&D Classics. And it's just all the old stuff, just reprinted straight up. It's not modified or updated or anything. And you can certainly go and purchase some of those. I think they're fairly cost effective. I wouldn't encourage you to go hunting for, scans or PDFs of these adventures, but you can find them. If you old game stores, conventions are a great place to find some of this stuff. And they're not terribly expensive. If you're just looking for a copy to read, if you're looking for like a mint copy with no markings inside, then it could run you some. And honestly, check eBay too. I've gotten some good adventures on there on the cheap.
Mm-hmm.
But don't go into this thinking that these adventures are awesome and you're gonna want to run them and you want to learn how to play first edition or second edition or basic so that you can run these games for your friends because things were so much better then. They weren't. It's nostalgia. Okay? And any gamer who says, man, these adventures were the best things ever. Yeah, they're saying that because they were also at a time in their lives when everything was simple and wonderful because they were children. And that is why nostalgia is such an insidious thing, because you associate these things you have memories of with a time in your life where everything was fantastic. And so it's got the emotional baggage of how wonderful life was at the time. So don't expect that. Don't expect that these are gonna like your draw is gonna drop and you're gonna be like, man, Dungeons and Dragons was so much better then. Dungeons and Dragons is better now, objectively better. It is better designed. The published adventures, they're not presentable. But if you look at the old adventures, they weren't presentable either. I mean, those stat blocks, it was just a paragraph of indecipherable, little abbreviations, and it was walls of text too. So no, everything now is better. It's just objectively better. But it's still worth looking at to see what was going on.
The thing I would say, the problem that I would see right off the bat is, unless you know all the rules of the old systems already, you're gonna have a lot of work to do to get ready to play an old adventure just to see how good or bad it was.
Yeah, but that said, most of the stuff that was in the adventures is prose. Like if you go back
that's true.
And if you go back to an old module, I'm just pulling one off the shelf. What have I got here? I actually have Ravenloft right here. And if you go back and you actually pop open these modules, most of it is just prose. The only thing you really get prose and you get stats. And the stat blocks are very small. What you'll find is that there is very little to these adventures. I mean, Ravenloft was 30 pages. That was it. And that's one of the biggest, most famous adventures that existed.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're readable.
You
don't need to know the rules.
I'm gonna have to re-steer people a little bit here, because it's the Dungeon Masters Guild.
Okay.
For 5e products and 5e supplements and things by the fan base, and WotC itself, Wizards of the Coast itself. But in order to get like the original Tomb of Horrors, you actually have to go to DriveThru RPG.
Oh, okay.
All right, and it's running. I mean, I'm looking at S1 Tomb of Horrors 1E right here.
Yeah.
The watermarked PDF is $5.
I mean, that's. People are gonna have to decide whether that's a good price point for a little bit of history there.
Yeah.
And by the way, the Tomb of Horrors was a terrible adventure. It was terrible then.
And it's not gotten any better.
No, but like everybody talks about that one as, oh my God, this was, such a great thing. And even taking into consideration why it was written the way it was still a terrible adventure. It was badly done. But anyway, check it out.
Yeah.
It is hilariously brutal.
Yeah.
So the number of times the players end up teleported somewhere naked and screaming is hilarious. It's like there was this weird fetish that Gygax had for teleporting the adventurers 500 miles away naked and screaming.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it happens at least 4 times.
I think that's about right. Yeah, 3 or 4 times. My recommendation is probably don't play them, but I mean certainly if you feel like you want to invest the dollars, they're worth reading, both as a cautionary tale and as a tour of how things used to be done. I wouldn't try to play the old ones anymore.
I'm gonna throw this. If you really, really want to see some good quality. I shouldn't say that because the modules were good for the time.
Yeah, at the time they were great.
They're just not anymore.
Yeah,
we've come so far. But where some really interesting things were happening in the modules was also Dungeon Magazine. And what's interesting is the number of people in Dungeon Magazine for whom Dungeon Magazine, which, by the way, Dungeon Magazine, back in the day, there were two magazines published, Dragon and Dungeon. Or I guess I should say Dungeon and Dragon.
Sure.
And Dragon was a general magazine about D&D, and it contained all sorts of new content and, editorials, reviews, new rules analyses, prose, comics, all sorts of stuff. And Dungeon Magazine was specifically for the publication of usually 5 to 6 adventure modules that the GM could use. And that Dungeon Magazine was bi-monthly. So every time you got one, there were 5 to 6 adventure modules for D&D or AD&D or second edition or basic, whatever it was at the time. And there were a lot of names in there that you look at them and then you look at the covers of D&D 3rd edition and 4th edition and 5th edition, and those names got their start publishing in Dungeon Magazine. And Dungeon Magazine was fantastic. There was some really great. I used to just leaf through it for the maps. I love the maps.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, if you want to really dig into the early days of D&D, those two magazines are probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, they tell you so much more about what was going on around Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Like they give you a much better sense of the community. But like if you're really looking for now the historical perspective of D&D, then you're going to be separating a lot of the wheat from the chaff there, because the bits of gold where like the various editorials that Gygax was publishing about the second edition of D&D that he was going to make that never happened because he was ousted from the company. It was fascinating to see where he was going with the game. And that was every couple of months, one of his editorials would just suddenly discuss it. But you have to look for that stuff. You would have to read each issue cover to cover and find the gold. But you'll also find that a lot of the stuff that is now coming out, like was Volo's Guide to Monsters, is actually based on a series of books that came out for second edition, the Volo's Guides, which were actually based on a regular Dragon Magazine column, where he was basically, each week or each month you would get an article talking about a location in the realms or something particular in the Forgotten Realms, told in the voice of Volo, he was one of the wizards of the Forgotten Realms, right?
I believe that is correct. Again, I didn't really play much around in the official settings.
Yeah, no, me neither did. Okay, so according to the Forgotten Realms wiki, sorry, Volo is Volothamp Gedarm. He's a legendary traveler and storyteller who published guidebooks of the realms. So he was basically the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Forgotten Realms. And I'm pretty sure that got started as a series of articles in Dragon Magazine. And actually, he and Elminster, now I'm checking this out, this is interesting. They are the oldest and longest lived NPCs created by Ed Greenwood in the Forgotten Realms. Huh.
Yeah.
Who knew?
There are a number of both Dungeon and Dragon magazines on DriveThruRPG, but many of them are just from the fourth edition era.
Yeah, and don't waste your time. Don't buy them.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the advice, is just maybe read it if you're really, really interested, but don't actually try to play it, and instead get Dungeons and magazine and Dragons magazine. Or Dungeon Magazine and Dragon Magazine. There you go. From reliable, legitimate sources.
Yes.
Wandering Learner wrote in on episode 1. Just because we're in October and Halloween is coming and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He just wanted to know if you've ever scared your players or been part of a game where it was actually scary. I have been in a game that was actually scary. And there were 13 of us playing it. And the guy who was running it was a big horror movie fan.
Mm-hmm.
And knew all the tropes by heart. And would just pull them off with no notice whatsoever. We would be like in a hallway, and he set it up so that we were all like in the same house, but the house was overrun with like Michael Myers and Freddy and Jason and all that kind of stuff, all those slasher horror guys, right? And they would just pop in behind you and take a swing at you. just randomly as you were going along. So you never, as a player, you never knew what was coming. You couldn't even really predict what was coming, except that it was going to be bad. And so you were constantly looking around behind you, and then there was another subplot with these cursed scrying stones being moved around all over the place and all this other kind of stuff. And eventually it ended up, I think, with about half the party dead for one reason or another, and most of that was at the hands of the other players. So yeah, I have played in a game where it was actually scary.
I cannot recall playing in a game where it was actually scary. But then I don't play that often. But I have run games where I have scared the players, and I mean, scare is such a broad term,
right?
Because there's different types of scare. I mean, there's startling, there's dread, there's revulsion, and these are all different types of scaring players.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the problem. I'm really having trouble coming up with a good specific anecdote that would be like, oh, let me tell you what I did this one time. But I think part of that problem is that, like, if you really want to scare people, like, you can go for that sort of, you're in a horror movie type thing. And obviously the players will be scared for their characters' lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be scared because they don't know what's going to happen next or whatever. But the key to really getting that sort of emotional reaction is things have to happen to things the players care about.
It's no good just threatening them with a big monster, because that is what D&D has got in it. Most role-playing games, there's a big monster somewhere, and that's not really all that scary. You have to, like you were saying, you have to go after things they have an investment in a way that is going to pull on their psyche a little bit, because it's not, they're used to, like, breaking their favorite sword, or, rust monster destroys their armor, that kind of stuff.
Okay, you know what? I'll give you, I have a good one. I have a good anecdote now. So this one campaign I was running, the Far Realm, the land of aberrants, was gradually invading the natural world. And the players really didn't know at the start what was happening. So they were sort of gradually realizing that something weird was going on. And the way I did this was, even though I sort of hate sci-fi elements, I went with it in this case and it sort of worked, was that the Far Realms invaders were terraformers, or, Far Realmiformers. They could not live in our universe in their form. So they were gradually finding ways to transform the world into a world they could live in. Right? That makes sense. So, and one of the things that they did, one of the first things they did was they would enslave people they would be transformed into these aberrant horrors. And what the players, they first started hearing about, these people were going missing. That was the first thing. People are just going missing. And this was the lead into the adventure. And as they started to investigate, what they were finding is that there was some sort of plague going on, that people were getting sick. And once they started coming down with symptoms, they eventually wandered off on their own and disappeared. Okay? Which, that already is like this scary thing where you have a person you care about who is gradually wasting away, and there is nothing you can do about it. And then one day they just disappear. They wander off to whatever. And I incorporated that element because when I was in high school, our cat got very, very sick. Beloved cat. We had him for many years and got very sick. And of course, that's what cats do. They go off to die. And so we always had this feeling of dread that this cat would wander away and that was the last time we would ever see it. So that was just something that I incorporated into this. And but again, this was all on a very gradual, slow boil. So the players are slowly uncovering this stuff. And at the same time, they're building relationships in this neighborhood because they're interacting with people. And it was a poor neighborhood. And, every time they would interact with someone, the person would be a nice person. And they had kids. And they were just, they were having a hard life. And they were just trying to get by. And, that just tugging at their general sympathies until they started to latch on to people. So then as they continue to investigate, and things start to get more and more serious, they start getting attacked by these monsters, these diseased humanoid monsters. And they start to put things together. The disease is connected to these monsters. And then they go into a house one day and they're attacked by one of these monsters, and there in the basement they find this little like mucus cocoon that had burst open, like this little blob of mucus that had burst open, and it had clearly been a cocoon. Something had been gestating, and that's when they put two and two together, and they're like, this is what's going on. These people get sick, and then when they're so sick, they wander away and hide themselves, go through this chrysalis, and they turn into these monsters that we've been killing. And then they start to realize that, they were killing small monsters. And then they start to realize that this disease is indiscriminate, and that they were not only killing innocent people who had turned into this, they might have gotten some children in there.
Mm-hmm.
So now they get hit with that. And as they keep investigating, now they've come to associate these cocoons with the monsters, but also with a person's life. That whenever they see these cocoons, number one, they're going to get attacked by a monster. And these monsters are not fun to deal with. And also they discover that they are contagious, and one of the players eventually gets infected, which was horror in itself. But the other thing is that later on they were wandering around and they hear a baby crying. Right? They hear this baby like screaming at the top of its lungs, and they come into a house and they find this basically an abandoned baby in a little crib or cradle or whatever. The baby was, like it was dehydrated, it was emaciated, it was in its own filth. It had obviously been left there for 2 or 3 days. And they go, and they take the baby and they take care of it and they give it to someone. But as they're investigating the rest of the house, in the basement, they find 2 of these cocoons. And they realize what happened, that the parents, the mother and the father, they got sick and they went down into the basement and turned into these monsters, and thank God they didn't do that. But the idea of a human being abandoning a baby to waste away was also just this horrible, horrible idea. And all of these things together all added up so that as they were dealing with this plague of basically people turning into monsters, it had such a human face by the end of it that every time they heard about a disappearance or they went into someone's house or they found one of these little cocoons, it was a horrible moment. So, but that's a long con. You got to build that,
Oh yeah.
So anyway, that was, I guess that's the best moment that I had of scaring the players, because they were scared, they were upset, they didn't want to kill the things anymore, but they knew they had to. And, they were just, it weighed on them. We had to resolve that plot thread quick because the game was quickly becoming a real downer.
Yeah, that sort of the same thing happened in that game I was telling you about. We had one guy who was a big-time family man. He had lots of kids of his own and whatnot, and we had a section where there was some interaction with things that appeared to be children, mm-hmm. and it really bugged him on a personal level to have to deal with them the way we dealt with them.
Right.
And there was a little sidebar about that in the middle of things, and that encounter ended very rapidly. In a much more platonic manner.
I hate to say go for kids.
Don't.
Well,
not unless it's okay with everybody.
Yeah, well, yeah. Obviously, your group has to be on board with horror, but there are certain things that are that are fundamentally human.
Mm-hmm.
You know, community, family. We care for our own. You know, we don't eat each other. Cannibalism, and that's why these things are horrible, and that's why all of the classic horror monsters. You look at vampires. You look at zombies. You look at werewolves, and those are all humans but. You know, humans, comma, but, dot, dot, dot. Something's missing. Something's wrong. Zombies are they are human. They are people you knew, but they are devoid of their humanity. They are just consuming machines. And whether, like, I mean, that was the Evil Dead. Not the Evil Dead. What was it? Dead Alive? The one in the mall?
Right. Yeah, Dead Alive.
Which that's basically just zombies as rampant consumerism.
Yep.
But that's what a zombie is. A zombie is just a human boiled down to just consumption. A vampire is a human devoid of, well, obviously it's a human with this unnatural appetite for feeding off other people, but that is basically a human devoid of its compassion and empathy. So it becomes a parasite. It lives well, it lives happily on the surface. A vampire looks like they're doing really good, but they are actually a parasite, and every good thing they have comes from consuming the people around them. It's a vampire is the ultimate in greed when you get down to it. That's why vampires are noble and highborn, and yet they feed off all the people around them just to keep themselves alive. To the point where they don't even do it because it gives them pleasure anymore. They do it because they have to. Where werewolves are basically human anger. Okay, they are our fear of our own tempers, especially. I don't want to get into the masculine-feminine dichotomy, but the masculine temper, the fear that we will go back to being an animal, and we will not be able to control ourselves. That's what a werewolf is. And I probably shouldn't spill that one in case it ends up in another podcast. But
Not that we
that's
do
what
that
horror.
sort of thing.
Yeah, no, but horror is all like. I mean, there's different types of horror, but one of the most important things about horror is taking a human being and taking away the things that we think make us human. The idea that a parent would abandon a child, that's a terrifying thing. That a child would just be left to die. That this disease would rob you of that. That's what makes it scary. So anyway.
See, this is kind of my objection to zombie games, both board games, RPGs, and video games. It's that some of them get it right. Most of them don't. If I see zombies in something, somebody had better be making a statement about something.
Huh, yeah.
Okay? Otherwise, the zombies are just cannon fodder, and that's not interesting.
Well, I mean, that's ultimately the problem, is zombies are, especially in video games, zombies are just Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
They're just yet another classic enemy that comes in hordes. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Speaking, can I share a funny anecdote? Speaking of making a statement,
Do we tell anecdotes on this show? Gosh.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So, because I mentioned Dead Alive, right? Which is if you haven't seen it, it is a classic zombie movie about a group of people who are locked in a shopping mall, and in a zombie apocalypse or a zombie outbreak. I guess we used to call them outbreaks before they had to consume the whole world. It was a zombie outbreak, and it's a really, really good movie. And thematically, it really is about the what was seen as human or American consumerism at the time, even though it's also just really about a bunch of people trying to survive in a shopping mall with zombies. So then Capcom comes out with Dead Rising, which is a video game about being trapped in a shopping mall with a horde of zombies, and you're a reporter, and you take pictures of the zombies because you're trying to document the thing. But you can also use everything you find around the mall to defend yourself with, and it's just a fun little playground romp through zombiedom. Oh, and you're trying to rescue survivors, right? Was it Universal? I think it was Universal. If it's not Universal, someone can correct me in email. Universal sued Capcom because they felt that Dead Rising was basically ripping off the Dead Alive movie. The court eventually found in favor of Capcom, and the reason the judge gave was that although the two works are substantially similar, the video game actually lacks any level of intelligent social commentary that would make it remotely comparable to Dead Alive.
Mm-hmm.
That was ultimately the judgment that stopped the lawsuit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, you don't have to pay anybody any royalties to use zombies. They're just a thing. Right. They've existed, in the folklore forever. Somebody should do an episode about them too someday, but whatever. And so it makes it easy. It's like using Cthulhu and the Eldritch, the whole H.P. Lovecraft universe. He, said, okay, I'm not going to charge anybody to use this. You don't need a license or nothing. Just write stories in the universe and do things in the universe and whatnot. So zombies are free to use, basically. So it makes it easy. Yeah. Oh, I need something with just a horde of enemies in it, or bad guys or targets or whatever. Let me shovel in some zombies, But that's not where the modern sort of. I want to be really careful with that word modern. That's not where the original resurgence in interest of zombies as a storytelling device began. Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Okay. It began because Romero wanted to say something about society. All right. All the good zombie movies have something to say about society or the people or, a sense of community or whatever. All right. It's not just, here's a bunch of guys shooting zombies.
Right.
There's more to it than that. And that's that, like I say, that's my whole objection to everything coming out with zombies in it. Is that they're not fulfilling the purpose that they were sort of designed for.
Yeah, but okay, now here's my counterpoint.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, here's the counterpoint. So what isn't? Okay, I mean, if you go back, let's take orcs, right? Not even going back as far as like the fairy, fairy goblins and stuff like that.
Right.
Go back to Tolkien. The orcs represented some very specific themes. They represented industrialization and naked conquest, and the dangers inherent in those. Right, and they represented the destruction of the natural world for progress's sake.
Yes.
Among other things,
Yeah.
And if you take any creature back, like everything that comes from mythology, all mythology had a purpose. It was a fable to tell people something.
Right.
So basically anything you throw in as just to be a monster is, it's the same as the zombies.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. There is no disagreement.
Oh, okay.
If you're throwing it in just for it to be the monster, you've missed.
But I would argue that there's room for that.
I think there is a tiny bit of room, but I think by and large, look, when somebody is trying to write Tolkien, right?
Yes.
Okay, you read that, you get that fantasy novel, and it's all just, flowery descriptions of the surroundings and, things, very similar happenings and whatnot, but there's no heart in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's the problem. Now, it's okay that that exists, and I'm sure there are some people who will enjoy that sort of thing, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the problem with those kind of stories, is that they haven't got really anything to say much. They haven't invested time in making an entire world that helps them say that. All right?
Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying, but that's not what I'm referring to when I say there's room for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To me, this stuff can also fill the same space as popcorn movies,
Mm-hmm.
summer blockbusters. You know, the mindless game you would just pop in and slam on.
Well, sure.
Just to do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there is that we can very easily get, and as GMs, I say this is a cautionary tale to you and I and all GMs. We can very quickly get our heads lodged up our own rectums with the idea of everything has to be a deep, meaningful, thematic story. Sometimes it is perfectly fine to fill a crypt with zombies because the players want to go plunder a crypt and kill some zombies.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm not disagreeing with you. You're
Okay.
totally right. I just feel like that it is being overused in that way.
Mm-hmm. I think I understand what you're saying is that they've become sort of a default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you can't be bothered to think of anything else or to use anything else or whatever, you just shovel some zombies in.
Zombies are the default in horror, as Nazis are the default in first-person shooters, as orcs are the default in fantasy adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It's the enemy that you can just throw hordes of out
Yes.
there. Yeah. Okay. And that's fair enough. But I will say you did bring up something that is a personal pet peeve of mine. I am sick and tired of people's worshipful love for Lovecraftian horror when they clearly do not understand what was horrible about Lovecraftian horror.
Yeah. That's a whole nother kettle of fish. I'm not even 100% certain that Lovecraft understood Lovecraftian horror.
Well, no, of course not. Like, I don't think most authors think. My literature and composition professor used to say something over and over again. It was trust the tale, not the teller.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact of the matter is, no matter how much you and I can sit here and analyze the themes in Star Wars or The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or, Canterbury Tales or anything else.
Right.
Most of those themes are accidental. they are. It's most.
It is so nice to hear somebody else say it.
It's because the author is telling a good story, a story that resonates with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the author is fed by their own experiences and the things that they see going on in the world around them. And then the artistry of building a good story is building a story that is, has the right beats and is tonally consistent and is thematically consistent, and it fits together and it resonates with people. And that's the art. But that's not something that you intentionally do. It's more sort of like the artist is sitting there and, he's making a cake and he tastes the batter and it's a little too sweet. So he adds some sugar, add some salt, and it's a little too dry. So he adds some milk and yada, 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 and feels it out. And gradually a delicious cake is made. Okay. And we ascribe a lot of intentionality to authors that they don't necessarily deserve. And Lovecraft did not necessarily understand everything that Lovecraftian horror represented. But Lovecraftian horror was a product of the time. It was a product of this growing intellectualism, this growing, it was basically a rationalist movement where it was sort of a rejection of superstition. It was there was anti-religious sentiment going on. And there was a lot of hope for the future because science and reason were going to lead us to a great place. And the ultimate horror of Lovecraft is, number one, the world is fundamentally incomprehensible because we ourselves are insufficient to understand it, and we never will be able to. Number two, the world is occupied by monsters that we would call superstitions. I mean, if you look at all of Lovecraft's stuff, all called back to very ancient myths. You know, there's ties to Egyptian mythology, there's ties to Sumerian mythology. All that stuff was not only religion, but religion that had been dismissed thousands of years prior. All that stuff was actually sleeping under the world. Number three, any attempt to understand it would shatter the human mind. And because if you live in this rationalist movement, your mind is everything, that is the ultimate terror, is to have your mind destroyed by your attempt to understand everything. That's what horror, Lovecraft is rationalist horror. Ultimately. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. But those are the basics. And that was a product of the time. And I sort of wonder, because you see, there is a sort of a new rationalist movement going on now. There is a new worship for science, science to the point of like fervent worship of science, as it will lead us through everything. You know, when you've got figures like, why am I blanking on, what's the astrophysicist who ruins everything?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, when you've got that guy, and he basically people hanging on his every word because they think that being a good astrophysicist makes you capable of speaking in any way to economic or social policy. You have a new rationalist movement. Religious faith is it's experiencing a decline, and at the same time, you have a lot of people who are applauding the movements that make jokes of religion, like the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. So, I sort of wonder if the people are missing the point of Lovecraft, because there is definitely an overlap between that sort of rationalist thinking and new atheism and fandom for Lovecraft. Or maybe that's why they're drawn to it, because, obviously we read horror to be scared. And maybe that's what's scary. So maybe they do get it. Maybe I'm being, a little bit unfair. But every time I hear someone talking about Lovecraft, it's always, something, something, something non-Euclidean, something, something, something tentacles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really, that's what you get from it? Because I got news for you people. We live in a non-Euclidean universe. Okay? Euclidean geometry is an abstraction. It is a perfect, ideal form of geometry. The universe we live in now appears to be at least reasonably close to Minkowskian geometry. Yeah, look that one up. So yeah, if you're looking at Lovecraft and you're thinking tentacles and non-Euclidean and big words and scary ancient monsters from the past, you're kind of missing the point. Because the point is that there is a truth out there. We can't understand it. Trying to understand it will destroy us. And the truth is terrible.
And there's your answer, wandering learner. Do you recall episode 2, sir, where we started out with some pronunciation problems?
Yes, I do.
And we eventually decided that the way to pronounce the French word for
breastplate.
Yeah, for a breastplate was cuirass or cuirass?
Cuirass.
Cuirass? Yeah. Yes. Okay. We have been sent actual pronunciation of cuirass by someone who actually speaks French.
Oh.
Cuirass. Cuirass.
Yeah, he's doing the R thing.
Yeah, it's got a funny little trill on the R.
Well, being French.
Yeah.
Cuirass. Okay.
So there you
We were
go.
close. Yeah, it was a standard American pronunciation.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the little message said to us in Twitter was given that you're an American and that you have American pronunciation, you didn't do too bad.
Yeah, you should be happy because they have the croissant, and we decided to call it the croissandwich. So
Hello, this is just a quick ad break. I know what you're thinking. There shouldn't be any ads in podcasts. That's okay. This is an ad for us. Wherever you are right now, look around. Are you getting this podcast on iTunes? Are you getting this podcast on Stitcher? Are you getting this podcast on Google Play or maybe on Overcast or whatever? You've got a podcatcher. Somewhere in there might be a way to rate or review this show. If so, please do. Also, if you have any comments or suggestions or points of interest that you want to mention about what we've talked about in any of our shows, head over to our website at digressionsanddragons.com and drop them in there. We'll be more than happy to comment on them and perhaps include them in the show. Also, we do have an email address. Unsurprisingly, it is digressionsanddragons@gmail.com. Feel free to contact us there. Back to the show. The official trailer for Star Wars The New Order Strikes Back has debuted. I mean, The Last Jedi.
Who cares? I'm sorry. I don't care. I'm done with Star Wars.
Yeah, that's the same problem I got into.
I've seen Empire Strikes Back already. I saw it back when it was good.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it back when it was the best of the Star Wars movies. And to be honest, like, I saw bits and pieces of the trailer. Because I saw it because I was watching a video that was making fun of videos that react to the trailer. So I saw it like 2 levels removed. And this is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing AT-AT walkers on a snow planet. And I'm seeing a confrontation between Girl Luke and Darth Emo, or whatever the hell the characters' names were. And I'm seeing all these iconic images and thinking, all of those things. Oh, and Girl Luke is training with some old guy. And going into a spooky cave. I'm like, I've seen this movie before.
I have not seen the trailer.
You have not watched the trailer?
I have not watched the trailer because it was announced that the trailer was out, and I saw that, and lots of people wanted to point that out over on the Twitters.
Oh yeah, everybody gets very excited about trailers.
And then wanted to tell me what they thought about it, apparently. And then all of a sudden, I was thinking, all right, maybe I'll go look at it. And then all of a sudden it was like, no, I'm not going to go look at it because I don't care anymore. I no longer care what the next Star Wars film is or what's going to be in it, or I am tired of hearing about Star Wars movies.
It's exhausting.
I'm still completely down with Star Wars. I still like Star Wars. I still like the films that, I like, and I still like, the books that I like, and I still like the TV shows that I like, and I still like the RPG that I like. But I'm tired of hearing about the movies.
Here's my thing with the movies. Okay? No matter what, they are going to run the movies into the ground. Disney has promised to run the franchise into the ground because they have promised that they are going to come out with a new Star Wars movie every year until they stop making money.
Mm-hmm.
Which means they are going to keep making Star Wars movies until they make another Phantom Menace that convinces them the franchise is dead. Which means at some point in the future, if I remain committed to Star Wars, I am going to have to sit through another Phantom Menace and then not get any closure, because as soon as something stops making money for Disney, they're just going to lock it up for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to live long enough to see them decide to take it back out of the vault and decide to reboot it. And quite frankly, I don't care to see them rebooted anymore. So, yeah, and you know what, this is the problem too, is the what was the one? The one that I saw, the Force Awakens, the Jedi's wake up, what?
Yeah. That one.
That movie was bad. It was a bad movie. It was in every way an inferior movie to the movie it was ripping off. Through the whole movie, I just kept seeing parts of it and being like, oh, this is just like Star Wars. Star Wars did it better. This is just like Star Wars. Star Wars did it better. This is just like Star Wars. Star Wars did it better. You know what? That is not something you want to do in a movie. Unless you really, really think you can do much, much better than the movie that you're ripping off, don't rip off a movie. Because people are going to compare it. Now, I don't know why I seem to be the only person capable of seeing why that movie was crap, but I am. So fine. Eventually all the rest of you will come around. You'll all realize it. And this is the other thing. Star Wars are kids' movies. They really are. They were back then. They were B movies for, teenagers. I'm not a teenager anymore. I can't drop $15 on this crap anymore. And I'm willing to admit the only reason I like the first 3 Star Wars is probably because, they were cool and I saw them as a kid and I'd never seen anything like them.
Yeah.
That was it.
The thing I have to keep reminding myself is that every Star Wars thing is somebody's entry into the Star Wars universe for the first time.
Yeah, think about the whole generation of the prequel.
Yeah.
Those poor kids.
Well, think about further back than that. Think about the kids that got roped in with droids and Ewoks cartoons.
Oh, what was the one Ewok movie?
Oh, I like those.
With the kids that they ended up spaceship crash. That's all I remember from it. Was all the Ewoks right around going spaceship crash.
Ewok Adventure, Caravan of Courage.
There we go. Wow, holy crap. Really, that thing had a subtitle, huh?
Yes, I liked them. I thought they were fine, but by then, everybody who was allowed an opinion thought the Ewoks were stupid in the first place. So, whatever. But even that was somebody's first in.
I know.
I just wish the first ins were better.
Look, if you listening to this, if you like the Star Wars movies and you're enjoying them and you like going to see them and whatever, don't let the opinion of 2 grumpy old podcasting jerks on the internet ruin that for you. They're not for us. They're for you. Go have fun.
Just, fast forward this bit.
Yeah, well, but, everybody's going to have their opinion. And, what I don't understand is not so much... It's not even whether the movies are good or not. That's a completely different point. It's that the fandom is bonkers. I never thought I would see the day where people were losing their minds in joy because a commercial had happened. Because a preview is a commercial. And you know what? Here's the thing. Unless the movie is made by people who are missing key brain lobes, like the recent Ghostbusters reboot, that preview is going to be good. Because they are going to chop out the best bits from the movie, or sometimes include bits that aren't even in the movie, to string together something that is designed to make you want to go see that movie. It is a bit of intellectual manipulation. And I never thought I would see the day when we would get excited about that. When people are like, oh my God, the preview dropped, I'm going to go watch the preview. To me, that's like being excited about finding out the future adventures of the Trix Rabbit. It's like, I wonder if he's going to get the tricks this time, or the kid's going to take it away again. Like, I don't understand it, because number one, previews lie. They lie. They're full of lies. In my entire life, I can honestly remember only, like, I can count on one hand the number of previews that actually made me want to go see a movie that I wasn't going to see. Because, you know what I mean? Like, it's like there's only been a very small number of previews that have actually changed my mind. I knew based on it was a movie that I would have seen anyway.
Right.
You know? One of them, I'll say, was The Matrix. The first Matrix. I was so intrigued by that preview because it managed to tell you absolutely nothing about what that movie was about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this looks really awesome, and I have no idea what it is. I have to go see it just to satisfy the curiosity. But everybody watching, nobody's mind is being changed by the Star Wars prequel. The Star Wars prequel is literally just hype building now. It is just emotional manipulation. It's not convincing. So there's no one on the fence about Star Wars. No one's like, well, I wasn't going to go see these Star Wars movies, but suddenly seeing this laser sword on an ice planet with a walking robot, now it looks really cool. That's just not what's happening. So these previews are just to emotionally manipulate you into getting excited.
Well, they failed.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited, just not the positive excited. I'm just like, shut up. Okay, it's a commercial.
All they did was annoy me. I was perfectly fine with one Star Wars movie every 3 to 5 years. That seemed like a good pace to me. I'm not so okay with one every single year. It feels like too much. It feels like you haven't had really time to digest the first one before the next one comes along.
But what in that movie had to be digested?
Well, okay, fair enough.
Sorry.
But sometimes what you like to do with a movie you're really excited about is sit down and discuss it with your friends for a rather lengthy period of time. In some cases, 20-odd years. Okay? But it's like you watch it the first time, then you talk about it, then you watch it again, then you watch it again, then when it comes out, you watch it again, and it comes, it's like, and you keep finding something new to talk about, something new to discuss, and something new to think about in good movies. And when you do that with an addition to the franchise every single year, you don't really have time to totally properly digest the movie before the next one's throwing new stuff at you. I mean, especially even like when The Phantom Menace had been announced, right? But hadn't come out yet. Mm-hmm. And the first trailer was only available on the internet for like a couple of hours before it aired on regular TV or whatever.
Right.
There was a whole thing. There were like 12 of us who were trying to get to that trailer. Mm-hmm. But we couldn't because, so was everybody else.
Right.
And the internet was much slower back then.
Far more than 12 of you.
Yeah. And the internet was much slower back then and made funnier noises. But it's like, oh my God, we've got to see this because it's the new Star Wars and this is, episode 1 or what's going on, blah, blah, Okay, sure. We bought into the hype and we bought in hard. It's the only movie I've ever lined up for. It is the only movie I will ever line up for.
Same here, honestly. I was, I think I actually went to a midnight showing of The Phantom Menace. Yeah.
I did. We were like back. 10th in line.
Mm-hmm.
But like from that trailer, we couldn't get a hold of it. So all right, well, I'll race home and see if I can get it here, and then I can forward it to them over there. It was that kind of thing.
Right.
And you only do that when you've really gotten invested in something. And you can only really get invested in something if you spend a lot of time thinking about it or interacting with it or whatever. You know?
Yeah, it can't be insubstantial. It can't come and go like a fart in the wind.
Right. Which
know?
which I feel like is where we're at with this movie every year thing.
Actually, that's a very apt point. It's kind of like you've got this meal that is like a great 6-course meal, but before you can even sit and digest what you're eating in this course, the waiter has just grabbed your plate and thrown something else down in front of you and is saying, "Hurry up! You've got 4 more courses to get through."
Yeah, and we close at 9. You know? It's like that's exactly where I feel like we're at with this, and I'm done. I don't care if I have to eat by myself. I want to take time and enjoy my meal.
Here's what I miss. I miss being surprised by a sequel. I mean, go back to the original Star Wars, Episode 4. Right? There was no plan to do a Star Wars 2 at that time. No matter what Lucas tries to say now. With his stupid revisionist history about how, oh yes, this was always going to be the 6-part story of Darth Vader. No, it isn't. No, it wasn't. In the first movie, Darth Vader was a gorilla on a leash, and everybody just made fun of his religion. That was it. This was not the story of Darth Vader. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, but I digress. The point is, like, I miss not knowing that there's going to be a sequel for 2 reasons. One, discovering that there's going to be a sequel for something you really enjoyed gets you excited, right? That's that thing you're talking about, Phantom Menace. Oh my God, nobody knew it was going to come back, and now here it is. It's back. I want more Star Wars. Fantastic. But number 2, every story had an ending. Star Wars had closure at the end of Episode 4. And it didn't trail off, leaving you feeling like there was this incomplete story that it had needed more to tell. And you could say, oh, well, Star Wars, The Force Unleashed, or Awakened, whatever it is, it told a complete story because they destroyed the super duper Death Star, and then everything was fine, and girl Luke accepted her destiny or whatever, and then she goes and meets Luke. That was just a sequel hook, and no, it's not. It's actually implying that there's more story there that got cut out. Because the story hasn't closed. I haven't now seen the complete arc of Rey. Not that she had a character arc really to begin with. But Luke had a complete character arc. So did Han Solo. Han Solo had a complete character arc, and Luke had a complete character arc through the first movie, through Episode 4. Han Solo went from the greedy smuggler to the scoundrel with a heart of gold who comes back in the nick of time to save everyone because he realized there's something more than money he cares about, and he does actually believe in things. Luke was able to finally give up his attachment to the world and put his faith in something and defeated the Death Star. And, so they had complete character arcs. That's satisfying. Now there's no reason for that because everything is just going to be a franchise. But then that leads me to, because now here's where I get to the really old guy get off my lawn thing. Do you think movies are dumber now?
Oh, man. Jeez. So, yes, but also no.
Okay.
If you're going to go see the big blockbustery kind of films, yeah, they're dumber.
Okay.
They're dumber. But if you're going to go see something a little smaller, maybe something that doesn't have a trailer in the middle of a football game, or something that maybe I don't want to say independent, because independent stuff can be just as dumb anyway.
Right. No,
but smaller releases, ones that don't get as much hype, ones that don't have big fancy trailers to them or whatever. some of those are very smart indeed.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying here, but comparing like for like,
Mm-hmm.
like first of all, I mean, just in terms of raw plot, I recently rewatched the original Ghostbusters movie and the original Back to the Future movie.
Mm-hmm.
And when you really look at those movies, they actually expect a lot of the audience. The concept of it, like, time travel was not like a household name in '85.
Right.
It was not something that everyone was familiar with. So, and the way the dialogue was in that movie, it sort of assumed that you were just going to keep up. Okay, especially when you go into Back to the Future 2 and 3, which now I realize that they have sequel hooks, and I'm shooting my own argument in the foot there, but whatever. Okay. Ghostbusters had some very important plot points that were very, very quietly handled. Like the fact that Ivo Shandor had constructed this building specifically to be a conduit for supernatural energy, and that is why ghosts were on the rise, and yada yada yada. That kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the least explained bit in the movie is why them crossing the streams at the end saved the world instead of blowing up everything. Because you really have to listen closely to the explanation of, to the dialogue that was going on to explain that, yeah, they were crossing the streams, but they were crossing them on the other side of the door to blow that universe closed. So they were blowing up a universe, it just wasn't ours. And all of that is contained in one line where Egon says, yeah, the door swings both ways.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you just watch that movie without really paying attention to it, it's like, oh, they said this would blow up the world, and then suddenly it's just like a Deus Ex Machina, where it's just okay. And it's like, no, actually, there is an explanation for it buried in the dialogue of the movie. But even beyond the plot complexities, I go back to things like character arcs, and the character building in general, right? And the characters in Ghostbusters were terrible, terrible people. They really absolutely were. I've done this whole Twitter rant about this, and they're basically they're terrible people who in the end they step up and do the heroic thing even though they know they're risking their own death. And that's why it was so significant that they were trying to cross the streams, because they had established that it could kill them. And they were not the sort of people who would give their lives for anything. Bill Murray, he was in it. It was a scam. Bill Murray just saw it as another scam. Ray or Dan Aykroyd was a man-child, who could not be trusted with anything. He was just excited like a terrier at everything in the world. Egon was, he was ludicrously dangerous. He had no sense of what he was doing. He once tried to drill a hole in his own head just to see if he could, and he built nuclear explosives in the middle of Manhattan, again, just to see if he could. He had no sense of the danger he posed to the world around him. And Winston just flat out said, Ernie Hudson, he flat out said he was in it for a paycheck. These are terrible people. But at the end, when it becomes important, the fact that they step up and risk their lives to destroy, to save their city, potentially destroying themselves in the process, that is what we call a character arc. It shows the growth of these four people through this movie. It shows they're capable of being something more than they were. Luke Skywalker had a definite character arc. I would argue that Rey's arc, although it's on the surface similar to Luke Skywalker, in the end, it actually amounts to a complete non-arc. Because she really didn't have anything to overcome other than being told to sit in one place and wait there for absolutely no reason. Luke when he didn't want to stay on the moisture farm, when he went off on the adventure, number one, he had an emotional connection to his family. Him leaving meant something, and we saw what that meant because we saw his family. Then when his family was killed, now he had that guilt because he brought that on them just by even considering the idea of running off with a crazy old hermit from the desert on an adventure. Now he got his family killed. So on the one hand, you could say, yeah, it was an easy way to disconnect him from his emotional connection. But on the other hand, that weighed on him. That held him back, and it made him less trustful of Obi-Wan. And he did not trust Obi-Wan's teachings at all. Rey was resistant. Like, I don't buy this. But, like, the most telling thing was the scene where Han Solo's like, yeah, you're right. Rey's like, oh, I don't believe in the Force. That's a bunch of mumbo-jumbo. And Han Solo says, you know what? I've seen enough things to say that there's really a Force, so believe it. And Rey's like, oh, okay. You know, when Rey finds her lightsaber and Yoda, girl Yoda, whoever she was, says, no, it's your destiny, trust your destiny. She's like, I guess so, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and it's on the surface, it's like a character arc, but it isn't really.
Well, that's the point I was going to make is character arcs have become a lot more flat. Yeah. Over the years. And I was sitting here thinking, maybe that's my problem with Marvel movies. You know, because the Marvel superhero flicks, I don't really enjoy all that much.
I enjoyed the first round of them.
They're big and splashy and actiony and all that kind of stuff, and that's great. But Iron Man, the first Iron Man,
yeah,
the first Captain America,
yeah,
and the first Avengers movie,
mm-hmm,
are the best of the batch.
Yeah. You know why? There were character arcs in those.
Yeah.
Okay. Iron Man, obviously Iron Man had a character arc. It was him recognizing that he had brought this evil on the world and taking responsibility for it, mm-hmm, and even taking responsibility for the sins of his father. Captain America is a little bit more of a complicated thing because he was the character that he wanted to be right from the beginning.
Right.
Because he was a pure soul.
Mm-hmm.
But in his case, it was more sort of getting the rest of the world in line with him. So he was basically externalizing his character, which that's also a fair arc. And the Avengers was basically, you know, this group of people who all are dysfunctional in their own way, coming together to conquer the evil. But here's the problem with franchises.
Yeah. You can only do that once.
Only do that. Yeah, exactly. That every Avengers story is going to be we have to come together, you know, and now there's going to be some sort of artificial obstacle between them that they have to overcome to come back together. But there's still going to be that sense of, haven't we been here before?
Mm-hmm.
Iron Man 2 was about him overcoming his being a lousy person in the same way that he was in Iron Man 1.
Yeah. So
that was just a reset button. And, you know, and I haven't even seen Iron Man 3. I'm going to say I like Thor. The first one. Again.
Oh.
But,
yeah, not so much.
But you know what? This is the stuff we give up when something becomes a guaranteed franchise. You know, what made... Like, I'm going to say something really weird here, because I'm going to go to the Men in Black movies as an example.
Okay.
The reason... Now, some people... You know, obviously people are divided on the sequels, Men in Black 2, Men in Black 3. I personally liked them. I enjoyed them, especially the third one. The second one, it very nearly fell into the problem that I'm about to discuss, and that is... It realized what they did successfully is that they realized that if they were going to keep this going in sequels, they were going to have to do something more than the first movie of, hey, isn't it weird that the world is actually home to these aliens and here's aliens causing a problem, you know. And so the first movie was all about that. It was the fish out of water. It was dragging Jay into this world. And then he said, look at how wacky this is. And how many scenes were just them playing off, what a wacky idea, which works for one movie. The second movie fell halfway into that, but at least it had Jay have some growth. Because it now took Jay and turned him into this psychotic workaholic, because he had given up his entire identity at the end of the first movie to be a part of this. And not knowing what else to do with himself, he became an ambitious workaholic person who alienated everyone around him and did not have a life of his own. And so he had to now overcome that new aspect of himself that the first movie enabled. Now, in the middle of the movie, they did do the whole restoring Tommy Lee Jones's memory, and then they were able to do a little bit more of the whole, isn't it wacky? Because now I'm reintroducing you to this wacky world that's wacky. But Jay had an arc again. And then, of course, in the third movie, even though it retconned a whole bunch of stuff, it explored different aspects of Jay's character. And he had another arc, and Tommy Lee Jones had an arc of his own in that movie. Well, young Tommy Lee Jones did. But that came of the fact that they didn't plan to make 3 Men in Black movies. You know, Sonnenfeld made the first movie, and Tim Burton made the first movie, and it was good and it did well, and they decided, okay, we'll make another one, but we're going to have to do it a little different. But that's the thing that you get out of not knowing you're going to have a sequel. Nowadays, they don't build movies, they build franchises. So we can just get stuck in these endless stories. And eventually what's going to happen is the Avengers is going to stop making money, and Thor is going to stop making money, and Star Wars is going to stop making money, and somewhere in the middle of some story, they're going to be like, man, we're done. And we're never going to get closure on those plot arcs, because they can stretch out character arcs and plot arcs through movie after movie after movie. And then it's just like, all those, after Lost was popular, then they came out with a whole bunch of those other, like, giant ensemble cast, what's going on with this mystery movie or TV series. And every one of them got canceled after the first season. So it was like, hey, we don't know. You'll never know what was going on in the event. Why did that plane disappear into a wormhole and then come back? Who knows? Come up with your own answer. So it's just, franchises destroy stories. When you set out to make a franchise, it destroys storytelling. I miss when franchises were accidental. Wow, that did really well. Can we make another one?
So a while ago, I think, in fact, back at Gen Con, when we were sharing the hotel room thing, I pointed you at a game called Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
Yes, sir.
If you recall that in particular.
I do recall that.
Excellent. I completed that today.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's about 12 hours.
Okay.
At least that's what it took me. And I only missed 2 pickups in the entire thing.
Good for you.
Yeah. But I want to talk about the game itself, not necessarily my, the kind of nitpicky sort of, this is my play experience mechanically. But I want to talk about the game overall. For those of you who don't know, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is about a young lady named Senua, who she's old world Celtic, but she finds herself having been in a Norse, living in a Norse community for quite some time. Okay? So you got Vikings, basically.
Right.
She has a problem. And that problem is she suffers from a psychosis in which she hears voices. She also occasionally sees things and whatnot. And the game is about her trying to rescue the soul of her dead lover from the Norse hell.
Which was not a pleasant place.
No, it was not. The way the creators of this game, Ninja Theory, have gone about doing this, I find absolutely fascinating. To start with, you are in Senua's head. Okay? Your view of the game is the 3/4 from behind. You know, she's slightly off to the left a bit. A view. All right?
So, third person over the shoulder.
Yeah, third person over the shoulder.
Okay.
Okay. But you are in her head. You can hear what she thinks, and you can hear what the voices are telling her.
Okay.
All right? They've done this by setting up what's called a binaural stereo microphone, and then having their voice actors in motion around that. Essentially, it's a microphone with ears on it. And it only picks up noise from a given direction. It's very directional. Okay?
Right.
So basically, they've built a 3D sound space around this microphone. And hear...
But one that does not conform to the world space.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. And what happens is these voice actors who are playing the voices in her head circle this microphone, delivering their lines in various ways. It is, within minutes of starting the game, very disconcerting. Because what happens is you don't know right off the bat which voice is telling you the truth, which voice is lying to you, and which voice is even Senua's.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So the other piece of this trick is, while these voices are telling Senua all these things, they're also telling you what to do. So essentially what happens is you become, I think in a way that hasn't really been prevalent in video games at all up to this point, you become Senua with all her problems.
Well, because you can't identify her voice from the rest.
Right.
Effectively, as her character is just another voice in the player's head.
Yes.
That's very interesting. That's very, very reminiscent of Deadly Premonition and Zack.
Have not played that.
Yeah, remind me about it another time. I'll talk about it. But
Okay.
You go on.
Okay. So, as you're going along, eventually, it takes you maybe 5 minutes or so to figure out which voice is hers.
Okay.
Okay? But there's also a second voice that comes in just as strong as hers that is almost the narrating voice for the game. Okay? It explains things from a certain point of view, so you know what's going on both in the game's setting and in her head, and why she's there and what she's doing. The game is, I want to say, it's very very Tomb Raider in style, except it's the rebooted Tomb Raiders, the new ones. Mm-hmm. You're going to go around, you're going to be solving puzzles. You are going to be in the occasional fight. But it's more, it's not a walking simulator.
Right.
Okay. But it's more linear than Tomb Raider is. The game puzzles are set up in such a way that you will know what answer you need, but you won't know where to find it, because the puzzle answers are hidden in the environment. Basically, what you do a lot is you open doors by finding runes in the environment. So each door has like 2 or 3 runes on it.
Okay.
And you have to look through your environment to find objects that make the shape of the rune.
Okay.
All right. It depends a lot on the angle you're looking at things from and whatnot as to whether or not you can find them.
Okay.
Combat is pretty straightforward. you will be walking somewhere, and out of nowhere these shapes will materialize in front of you or behind you or wherever and attack you, and it's up to you to defend yourself and eventually eliminate them. What I really enjoyed about the game, that's the mechanical stuff. That's, whatever. What I enjoyed really about this game was how quickly they put you into the story, and then how quickly they made the story real.
They made it your story.
Yeah. You get a lot of Norse mythology.
Always fun.
There is a character who can best be described as the trickster character, who tells you the story of the Viking lore and that kind of stuff. But he does it in chunks, and each chunk is related to what you're doing and sort of helps you to understand what is happening to you and what's coming next. I think I messaged you about this at one point. They told me a story I hadn't heard before until I had read a Word of the Week script.
Yeah. And
it was like the same day that I read that, they told me the story in the game, so it was very interesting. But look, the game is dark. It's creepy. It's disconcerting. And it's brilliant, I think.
It really sounds it. I was following its development. And the reason, I hate to say it, the main reason that I didn't get drawn into it is because of it from a mechanical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Where, as you mentioned, it has been criticized for being extremely linear, that it has long periods of slow parts away from the gameplay. And I thrive on like the Twitch gameplay. I thrive on the action. But after hearing more about it and hearing you talk about it now, I really do need to check it out.
I think you do. It's I'm not going to disagree with all that. I don't know about slow parts away from the gameplay, but because the whole thing is, there's gameplay. You're having gameplay. You're not having gameplay every single minute, but I don't think there's anything inordinately long between either a fight or a puzzle solving or whatever.
Well, I sort of view the puzzles as away from the gameplay.
Yeah, but the puzzles are pretty crucial.
Well, understandable, but
yeah, and I think the reason the thing is so linear, because I'll grant you, there are big spaces to explore, but there's not much in those spaces.
Right.
But I think the reason it's linear is because that's the only way they could tell the story they have told.
And look, I'm never ever going to complain about a game just because it's linear.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people do get down on games like, oh, this is too linear. But people forget that there are benefits to being linear.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is just, it's just outright pacing, if nothing else.
Yeah.
It's telling a story with a certain pace to it. So things hit at the right moments, and So I'm not down on a game just because it's linear. And
right.
if the game can entertain me in other ways, I will certainly enjoy a linear game. But if there's a space to explore and no benefit to explore, because you know me, I'm a big exploration
right.
junkie. I want the physical space to explore. And I want, like, my puzzles that I really thrive on are puzzles that derive from understanding the physical space and getting around them and things like that. Yeah. I'm probably the only person in the world who actually likes the water dungeon from Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, because that was essentially a puzzle about understanding the physical space and making it work.
There are a lot of puzzles like that. The door thing is just the main one that you're going to encounter the most.
Okay.
There are puzzles that involve you moving in a certain way past a gate or an arch to see a different reality on the other side of the arch that you need to take advantage of.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Okay. There are puzzles that require you to shift the scene from day to night
Okay.
in order to progress. There are puzzles that require you to look at a scene from a very specific angle
Mm-hmm.
so that pieces of the scene line up properly to open up pathways in front of you.
Okay.
It's quite good. The other thing, and this really surprised me, they are not afraid of the dark in this game. The developers.
Mm-hmm.
They were more than happy to put me in 2 or 3 pitch black areas and tell me, figure out how to get through it. What you want is on the other side. Go for it.
Good. The classic invisible 3D maze.
Yeah, but this is really... Keep in mind, all this time you have these voices in your head going on. There's got to be at least... I want to say there's at least 10 of them. Okay? And some are telling you the truth, and some are lying to you, and some are trying to make you feel bad, and some are trying to make you feel good, and some are trying to misdirect you, and some are, it's just like... But the trick is, one voice is not doing the same thing all the time. It might be lying to you here, but telling you the truth over here.
Which, I mean, that's much better. Like, that's more sensical than the voice that always tells you the truth and the
Right.
voice that always lies,
Right, and it's the combination of the voices
Mm-hmm.
and the visual style of the game and the visual characteristics of the game provide you with an experience that is very much like what it is to be the sort of person who hears voices and sees things. And they did this in combination with people actually suffering from these conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought in actual people with various psychoses and whatnot, and talked to them and played the game with them and showed them what they were doing. And they were involved, I guess, from like day one of development on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So all the way to the end, they've had professional consultants, doctors and psychologists and that kind of stuff. And
I knew that they were working with neurobiologists
Mm-hmm.
or neurophysiologists or something in the development of it, but
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that they were actually also working with troubled individuals.
yeah, it's
You know.
I can't explain everything about the game because a lot of it is kind of spoilery.
Yeah, no, I think it's best if we avoid the spoilers.
but
partly because you may have sold some people on it, and you're moving towards selling me on it. It's one of those. It's a hesitant purchase for me. It's something that I really do want to check out, but again, I sit there and it's like, right now it's $30 on PS4, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's not as expensive as a full release, but at the same time, lately. I just don't have the money to sink into video games that
Uh-huh.
because you just ask your parents and they would make it happen, and you don't
Right.
know how, So I just don't have the money to sink into every video game I want now. So it's like there are like 3 or 4 things right now that I'm sitting on, hesitantly wanting to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm very interested in in Metroid Returns for the DS, and I've heard such mixed things about it. I know I'm not going to decide until I just play it for myself.
Right.
Same thing with Senua's Sacrifices. This is a game. It could amaze me. It could bore the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
It could go either way.
Well,
And it seems like from the reception, it seems like it's that sort of game that you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it.
Yeah, if you're looking for open world exploration, lots to do kind of game, this isn't yours.
Oh, I mean, I can play the other sort of game too.
But but in terms of experiencing a game, I don't think you would want to miss this particular experience.
Yeah.
I will tell you, the opening will not sell it because the opening is about 5 minutes long.
Oh, okay, that's nothing.
And it consists of her paddling a log to where the game actually starts.
Oh, okay. So the first person vehicle section that starts off every shooter.
Yeah, it's
Ever since Half-Life did it.
I mean, they're giving you story while this is going on. They're explaining the game, and I mean, not really explaining the game because they don't put a tutorial up at
Right.
all. There is no tutorial at all.
Good.
But they do kind of explain the setting and what she's doing and why she's doing it and that kind of stuff. And they're building the world while she's paddling, and they're also rolling credits by you at the same time.
Okay. No, that's fairly standard for a video game.
But that's
opening.
okay because they then spend at the very end of the game probably another 5 or 10 minutes ending the game after you've finished. Because and it's not bad. I mean, it's not like a Hobbit or a Lord of the Rings ending. Where it ends 5 or 6 times. This is the
Right.
ending, and this is the wrap up, and this is what happens to her and why, and her journey is. This has big character arc, not little shallow ones. This has big character arc.
Well, I would expect it to. And to be totally fair, too, I mean, as far as, like, if I'm playing a game for the narrative,
Mhm.
then I damn well want good closure.
Oh yeah.
It's don't sell me short on the ending there. Don't give me an ending that is just pick which color laser you want to end the game with.
Right.
At the end of Mass Effect, but
I find the game to be extremely immersive. I find it to be extremely informative, and I find it to be extremely moving by the time you get to the end of it.
all right, you have sold me. So if anybody out there listening has $30, send it to my PayPal. Now I got to be careful making that joke.
Yeah.
I can't make those jokes online anymore of buy me this because I always have someone who's taking me seriously now.
Yeah.
Which
And you listening to this, even if this is not your kind of game, give it a shot. I realize it's $30. I realize also that it's not, from a major publisher, but then a major publisher wouldn't have tried this.
Well, hold on a second. To be fair, okay, Ninja Theory is not someone with no credentials.
This is true.
Okay, and the fact that Ninja Theory was working on it was one of the things that was pulling me toward it.
Mm-hmm.
Was because they have a good combat system in general.
Yes.
What was it? Heavenly Sword?
Yeah, Heavenly Sword.
Yeah, that was game had a very interesting combat engine.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and say this, and then somebody will make me regret it later.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to play some really good games, play some Ninja Theory games. Okay, they seem to know exactly what they're doing. In particular, if you want something more actiony from them, you want like all kinds of stuff that is just puzzly and jumpy and platformy and fighty and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Check out Enslaved: Odyssey to the West.
I knew you were going to say that one.
That was an incredible experience as well.
It wasn't
not as incredible as Hellblade, but boy, was that good.
It was interesting. You know what? I didn't get through it.
You didn't?
No, I kind of petered out on it.
Oh well, okay. But anyway.
But there was nothing wrong with it. It was just one of those games that sort of,
Mm-hmm.
I got distracted with other things and then it just never went back to.
Yeah.
It was okay.
Yeah.
But I will say, yeah, definitely check it out. Plus, of course, like everything that is based on Chinese mythology, it is based on, Journey to the West.
Right.
Because that is the only thing the rest of the world knows about Chinese mythology, is that one book. I think we made that joke in a previous episode, did we not?
Possibly. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice is, I think, really good. I think most people will, if nothing else, have a very good experience with it. Whether you like it or not, the experience is gonna stick with you.
Mm. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out at some point. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually.
Cool. And you'll have to let me know how that goes, except, obviously later because we're out of time.